the Dead Sea, one of the most inhospitable places on the planet. At 1,300 meters below sea level, the shores of this desolate salt lake are the lowest place on Earth. Although the River Jordan, a sacred place for time immemorial, flows into it, there is nowhere for the water to go, its only release being the punishing sun evaporating it during the course of each day, leaving just salt and mineral behind. This is very likely the saltiest body of water on the planet, more so than the Great Salt Lake of Utah. Just a few gulps of this liquid will kill a human in a matter of hours. Not only that, but deep sinkholes regularly appear all over its banks, threatening to open up and swallow those foolish enough to wander too close to the shore. Yet, all the same, people have not only lived here, but on many occasions thrived for thousands upon thousands of years. This is Bible country. According to biblical archaeologists, on one edge of this lake, the once prosperous cities of Sodom and Gomorrah may have once thrived. The similarly ancient city of Jericho and a whole multitude of other biblical sites are located only a few days' walk away. And later still, salt merchants from the Bronze Age to the Ottoman era risked their lives to brave the harsh, deadly still waters of the sea. It was also here, generations later, in the spring of 1947, as Palestine teetered on the verge of a new war, that 3 young Bedouin boys, their ancestors having wandered the region as nomads for time immemorial, stopped at the ancient watering hole of Rash Feshka to rest their animals. The story goes that one of the boys wandered off from the main group. Bored, he began throwing rocks into some nearby caves. When he heard the loud crash of pottery breaking, he stopped in his tracks. Clearly, one of his projectiles had made contact with some sort of an item inside the cave. A single thought entered his mind: treasure. He ran back down the cliff to tell his friends, but night was swiftly approaching. Upon investigating the next day, the boys were disappointed to find that the cave did not contain buried treasure, but a simple collection of clay pots, one of them broken with a number of ancient scrolls spilled out of it onto the cave floor. Little did they know it at the time, but those Bedouin shepherds had just made the single greatest discovery in the entire history of biblical archaeology and Jewish Second Temple period studies. It was perhaps the most famous archaeological discovery of the 20th century, and soon to become a cultural icon, famous the world over. For those pots contained the first of the Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1947, once more the dark shadows of war fell upon the Middle East, and to the world at large, as chaos tore through the region over the next 2 years, the whereabouts of those ancient scrolls discovered by the Dead Sea remained shrouded in mystery. Unbeknownst to the world at large, just before the outbreak of war, the Bedouins who had found the initial scrolls had sold them on to a Syrian Orthodox priest in Jerusalem for the meagre sum of around $250. Those who read the scrolls at this time were the first to do so in over 2,000 years, noting incredulously that they were nearly identical to the Old Testament Bible that we know today. But, as we shall see, the Dead Sea Scrolls offered so much more. By the time relative stability and a new nation, Israel, surfaced by around 1950, the whereabouts of the scrolls still remained largely hidden. It wasn't until 1954, when an anonymous ad was placed in the Wall Street Journal, that they eventually resurfaced. They'd been smuggled into America and put up for sale. When they were bought, this time by a travelling Israeli archaeologist on the behalf of his country, the price was an astounding $250,000, 1,000 times more than the price given to the Bedouin. As news came out all over the world that the scrolls were the oldest copies of the Hebrew Bible ever found, having only 13 or so minor variants from the 10th century Aleppo Codex, as well as the huge amounts of money involved, the race was on for archaeologists and Bedouin tribesmen to find more of the same out in the desert. Eventually, by 1956, a total of 11 caves containing scrolls had been found. 5 of them natural and 6 man-made, carved out of the soft rock of the region. Astonishingly, all had remained untouched since they were first deposited there some 2,000 years before. They contained somewhere around 800 manuscripts. The scrolls were written in a variety of languages: Aramaic, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, the various languages spoken in the region 2,000 years ago. Astonishingly, they contained a huge wealth of writings, including alternate versions of biblical texts, along with completely original works never before seen. Hypothesized to be a long-lost library, the scrolls provide a fascinating glimpse into the long-lost world of an extinct religious sect that existed at the same time Jesus walked the earth. The scrolls can be broadly categorized into 3 distinct sections. Firstly are the Old Testament biblical documents, mostly identical to the Bible we know today. Interestingly, one of the first scrolls discovered is known as the Genesis Apocryphon, an alternative version of the book of Genesis written in Aramaic, which contains a long-lost conversation between Noah and his father Lamech, which isn't in the Bible. Second are texts relating to the everyday life and literary heritage of the period, many being written in Greek and Latin, the languages of administration during the later Second Temple period of Judaism. Perhaps the most interesting of all, however, and certainly the most controversial, is the third grouping, the sectarian scrolls. These describe the life and teachings of the people who made the writings, a secretive, apocalyptic group who refer to themselves as the Sons of Light. Radiocarbon dating had only just been introduced by the 1950s and was deemed too unreliable and potentially damaging to be used to date the scrolls. Instead, paleographic dating was used, literally meaning the study of writing. Though later on, less invasive carbon-14 dating was also implemented. All of these methods conclusively dated the texts to the same roughly 300-year period, from the 3rd century BC all the way up to the 1st century AD, an incredibly important time for the history of the world. Also in the 1950s, just as the scrolls were being deciphered, the nearby archaeological site of Habat Qumran was investigated too. In time, most scholars came to agree that this site, only around a day's walk from Jerusalem, yet nonetheless completely isolated out in the desert, had been the base of the Sons of Light.